Beware the Fish by Korman. I never get caught. The following Saturday morning, Miss Scrimmage's girls were enjoying a delightful brunch on the front lawn of the school. At the head of the table, Miss Scrimmage herself was pouring tea. Unnoticed by her, two girls had stolen away to the apple orchard adjoining the school. From halfway up a large tree, Kathy Burton was staring across the road through her binoculars. "I told you something weird was going on at the hall," she called down to her blonde roommate, Diane Grant. "The whole place is in an uproar. It looks as if they're moving or something." "Moving where?" Diane asked, mystified. "That's just it," was the reply. "They're not moving anywhere. They just seem to be walking around with suitcases and beds, bumping into each other a lot." "Can you see Bruno or Boots?" Diane asked. "There they are," said Kathy. "Boots is just standing there, and Bruno's sitting on the biggest pile of stuff you ever saw." "Kathy! Diane!" Miss Scrimmage came marching into the orchard, her expression severe. "Young ladies do not perch in trees, nor do they leave the table without permission. You will be restricted to your room this evening, and every evening this week return to your places at once." "Don't worry," whispered Kathy to Diane as she dropped to the ground. They'll let us in on it soon enough." Across the road, the objects of their attention were busy hauling beds and belongings from dormitory 3 to the other two buildings. In the midst of the hubbub, Bruno Walton had flopped down on his possessions. "You go on without me," he said dramatically to Boots. "I'll be along eventually." "Come on," said Boots. "Let's get there and get it over with." They were both finding it hard to leave 306. Reluctantly, Bruno struggled to his feet. The two boys piled belongings on top of their bed and began to carry the whole arrangement toward dormitory 2. "It's a good thing," Bruno muttered, "that Elmer has a spare bed. It would kill me if we had to carry 2 of them." They managed to struggle into the building and down the hall to room 201. Bruno kicked the door open. "Hi, Elmer. It's us. We're moving in." Elmer turned from his desk where he had been peering through a microscope, making notes. "Hello," he greeted them. "Come right in. You can put your bed right over, Where can you put the bed?" The room was already filled almost to capacity. A large fish tank gurgled on top of the bureau, and a huge sand-filled terrarium, the home of Elmer's ant colony, perched beside it. Books were piled everywhere, and an assortment of peculiar-looking devices lined the walls. On every available surface, a plant pot stood. There was a fern, a trailing ivy, a Venus flytrap, a desert yucca, and pride of the collection, a 2-meter cactus currently in flower. There were also countless unidentifiable herbs and fungi. The only wall decoration was a large labeled diagram of the Pacific salmon. It was rumored at McDonald Hall that Elmer kept an endless supply of these, in case the one in use became shabby. Bruno indicated a complicated mechanical device standing against the wall. "Why don't we move that electroformionic impulse pussyfooter or whatever it is?" he suggested. "Oh, you can't do that," said Elmer. "It's bolted to the floor. You'll just have to put the bed in front of the door." "But how can we get in and out?" asked Boots, more concerned with getting out than in. "We'll have to climb over," said Elmer. He peered at Boots earnestly through his large horn-rimmed glasses. "You don't mind, do you?" "Oh, no, of course not," said Boots. Thinking longingly of nice room 306, he cast a stricken glance at Bruno. Bruno shrugged. "Listen," cried Sydney. Butterfingers Rampolsky's indignantly across the lunch table. "Listen," cried Sidney Butterfingers Rampolsky indignantly across the lunch table. Everybody drops a clock now and then." "But you dropped my clock," protested Larry Wilson, his new roommate, "and you broke it." "Well, I did cut my finger on the glass," protested Sidney. "Don't I get any sympathy for that?" He held up a bandaged finger to support his claim. "No," said Larry sourly. "If McDonald Hall didn't have to keep a klutz like you in bandages, it wouldn't be in such a pickle now." "That pickle," Bruno Walton cut in, "is what we're here to discuss." They cut out pickles 5 weeks ago," sighed Wilbur Hackenschlemmer. "I thought we were here to eat." Boots looked with distaste at a dainty cucumber sandwich, "but I guess I was wrong about that." Ignoring them, Bruno got up and surveyed the table. Larry and Sidney were still glaring at each other. Big Wilbur Hackenschlemmer sat dreaming of a triple-decker hamburger with the works. Pete Anderson, who is now rooming with Wilbur, Elmer Grimsdale, Boots, and himself made up the rest of the committee. MacDonald Hall is in trouble, Bruno announced dramatically, and the responsibility of saving it rests with us, the MacDonald Hall Preservation Society. The boys looked at him uneasily. Bruno's causes were notorious. I'm having enough trouble saving myself, said Wilbur. Besides the fact that they're not feeding us, what's wrong with MacDonald Hall? I'll tell you what's wrong, exclaimed Bruno. It's going down the tube. They may even put it up for sale. That's ridiculous, snapped Pete. The Fish would never allow it. The Fish is only headmaster, Bruno reminded him. He doesn't own the place. He just works here. He's a victim like the rest of us. I don't believe it, said Sidney flatly. Believe it, said Larry. I'm the Fish's messenger. I'm around to hear what goes on in his office, and it's true. What do you think all these economy measures are for, added Boots. That's right, agreed Bruno. It's a bad situation, and the salt shaker in Elmer's hand, slipped from his fingers and clattered to the table. He raised astounded owl-like eyes to Bruno. You mean that MacDonald Hall is going bankrupt? We just finished saying that, Elmer, said Bruno patiently. Although Elmer was the school's genius, he was not known for his quick grasp of everyday matters. Pay attention. This is very important if we're going to save the school. But what can we do? Asked Pete. We're just students. Well, it seems to me, said Bruno, who had as usual taken over proceedings, that if we can do something really great and get a lot of coverage in the newspaper and on radio and TV, they'll get all sorts of new students. Everybody wants to send their boys to a school where terrific things happen. Sounds good to me, said Sidney. What terrific things? Asked Boots cautiously. He had been involved too many times before in Bruno's outrageous schemes. Well, that's going to be the hard part, admitted Bruno. I haven't thought of any yet, but I'll have a suggestion box outside our room. That's 201 right after lunch. Talk it up a lot so all the guys will know. I want that box full of suggestions by morning. If we don't come up with an idea to put this place on the map, then we don't deserve to keep MacDonald Hall. After lunch, Bruno, Boots, and Elmer went back to Dormitory 2 and climbed over Boots's bed into their room. Elmer, what have you got for a suggestion box? Asked Bruno. Ah, there's something. He reached down and tapped a large black box that sat on the floor by the bureau. No, cried Elmer. Don't touch that. It's extremely delicate electronic equipment. I'm working on a new theory of video broadcasting. Hot gazoobies, said Bruno happily. Our first suggestion. You invent some new TV thing and we'll get all sorts of publicity. But I still haven't got a suggestion box. I know. We'll use Boots' suitcase. He picked up a canvas duffel bag, zipped it open, dumped the contents on the floor, and smiled in triumph. Come on, Boots. Make yourself useful. Draw up a sign that says suggestion box. Can I pick my clothes up off the floor first? Sir, asked Boots sarcastically. Oh, we'll help you do that, Bruno replied cheerfully. Elmer, pick up his clothes. Hurry up with that sign, Boots. I'm expecting millions of suggestions. And what will you be doing, oh master? Bruno hurled himself onto his new bed and wriggled until he was quite comfortable. I thought I'd take a nap, he replied. We've got to get to scrimmage tonight. Why? Asked Boots. We've got to get to scrimmages tonight. Why? Asked Boots. We've got plenty of food left. We need the girls' suggestions, said Bruno. And, he added, it wouldn't hurt to get a little more food. Don't forget, we're begging for 3 now. Elmer was touched. Elmer was not quite so touched at midnight when he found that he was expected to accompany the expedition to scrimmages. But it's against the rules. If we get caught, we'll be punished. Agreed, said Bruno. But I never get caught, so punishment is out of the question. Come on, Elm, live dangerously for once in your life. Come on, Elmer, grinned Boots. There are girls over there. That's just it, said Elmer. Girls make me extremely nervous. I simply cannot talk to them. My tongue dries up and my throat closes. Well, it's a good time to start learning, decided Bruno. Come on, Elmer, it's for your own good. He nodded at Boots, and between the two of them, they hustled Elmer out the window and dragged him across the campus and the highway. Before he knew it, he was climbing the wrought iron fence, and then watching Bruno toss pebbles at the second-story window. When Kathy and Diane stuck their heads out, Elmer ducked behind Boots. More food, Kathy called in disbelief. That too, said Bruno, but we have to talk to you. We're coming up. One by one, with much more hoarse protesting from Elmer. The three boys shinnied up the drain pipe and were helped in through the window by Kathy and Diane. Kathy regarded the skinny crew-cut boy who stood cowering before them. I see we have a newcomer, she observed. You know Elmer Grimsdale, said Bruno. By reputation, she grinned. We haven't been introduced. Hi, I'm Kathy. Elmer made a strangled noise deep in his throat. And I'm Diane, said the blonde girl. When there was no reply, she glanced questioningly at Bruno. Doesn't he talk? No, I do not, croaked Elmer. He's a little nervous, explained Boots. It's something to do with his tongue in his throat. We live with Elmer now. The hall closed dormitory 3 and kicked us out of our room. That's terrific, exclaimed Kathy. No offense, Elmer. That's what all the ruckus was about then, said Diane. All the running around with beds and everything. Boots nodded gravely. Now down to business, said Bruno. We're in big trouble. So what else is new? Asked Kathy with a grin. No, he doesn't mean us. He means MacDonald Hall, said Boots. The hall is going bankrupt. We could close up soon. You girls could end up with a slaughterhouse across the road instead of us. What? Shrieked Kathy. No, soothed Elmer, finally regaining his voice. The zoning bylaws would never permit a slaughterhouse. A large sewage treatment plant, perhaps. I understand the city is looking for a place to locate one. Oh, no, cried Diane, appalled. Well, Elmer added dubiously, perhaps it will only be a high-rise apartment complex. Kathy and Diane moaned in unison. Wait a minute, Bruno put in. You're not getting any of that stuff across the road because we are going to save MacDonald Hall. We're going to get so much publicity that enrollment will double and there won't be any reason to close the school. What's our job? Asked Kathy. We'll do anything, Diane put in. We need publicity, said Bruno. Your job right now is to figure out how we're going to get in. Tell all the girls, Boots added. We need all the suggestions we can get. We'll be back in a couple of days, said Bruno, to hear what you've come up with. Behind him, Elmer groaned. This adventure, he was certain, was enough to fill his lifetime quota of excitement. Having Bruno and Boots as roommates was not going to be easy. Now, said Bruno, how about some food? Diane tiptoed to the door. Be right back, she whispered. True to her word, she was back in less than 5 minutes, carrying the usual paper bag. Sandwiches tonight, she told them, part of tomorrow's lunch. We better get going, Boots suggested anxiously. Bruno took the bag and stuffed it into Boots's hand. He swung a leg over the window ledge. Thanks for the grub. Work hard on those suggestions. He started to shinny down. Boots followed, and Elmer, anxious not to be left alone with the girls, was right behind him. Bruno's feet hit the ground with a thud. Halt! Cried a voice. Just as Boots slipped to the ground behind Bruno, a beam of light illuminated the two of them. At the top of the drain pipe, Elmer, frozen with fear, felt hands grasp his arm. Kathy and Diane hauled him back up over the sill and into the room. Stay down, Kathy whispered. It's Miss Scrimmage. She's got Bruno in Boots. I thought I heard screams, said Miss Scrimmage, pointing a shotgun at the two boys. You should be ashamed of yourselves coming over here and terrorizing my poor innocent girls. Hands over your heads. Her hair curlers bounced as she gestured with her shotgun toward the highway. Now quick march back to MacDonald Hall. I'm taking you to Mr. Sturgeon. Move, both of you. Bruno looked around. There were only two of them. What had happened to Elmer? Miss Scrimmage, seething with indignation, marched them across the road and the MacDonald Hall campus to the headmaster's cottage, which stood at the edge of the south lawn. Heedless of the fact that it was 1 a.m. and that she was in her dressing gown, she rang the bell insistently. A few minutes passed before Mr. Sturgeon appeared at the door in his red silk bathrobe and his bedroom slippers. He took in the scene with one horrified glance. Miss Scrimmage, put down that weapon this instant, he exclaimed. How dare you point it at any of my boys? They are marauders, Miss Scrimmage accused. I caught them on your grounds, terrorizing my poor defenseless girls. You may consider yourself lucky that I did not simply turn them over to the police. The headmaster hustled Bruno and Boots into his house and placed himself between them and Miss Scrimmage. The police, he said in an icy rage, would be interested to know that you chase children around with guns in the dead of night. These boys will be dealt with. Good evening. He slammed the door in her face. Mr. Sturgeon turned to Bruno and Boots to find his wife comforting them. "Mildred," he said, "please go back to bed." She ignored him. "Bruno, Melvin, you poor boys. You must be awfully frightened. What were you doing over there?" Wordlessly, Boots held out the food parcel. Mrs. Sturgeon opened the bag. "Sandwiches! Oh, William, they were hungry. I told you growing boys have to have their evening snack." "Enough of this!" exclaimed Mr. Sturgeon. He opened the door a crack and peered outside. "Is the coast clear, sir?" asked Bruno in a small voice. "You may go," barked Mr. Sturgeon, "but you will be in my office at 8 tomorrow morning. Good night." "Oh, Miss Scrimmage, it was just terrible," quavered Kathy. "We were so scared. Thank goodness you saved us." Miss Scrimmage sat down on the bed under which Elmer Grimsdale cowered, paralyzed with fear. "You poor darlings," she said comfortingly. "You have nothing to fear while I am here. I can smell an intruder anywhere." Underneath the bed, some dust went up Elmer's nose. He sneezed. "Gesundheit, dear," said Miss Scrimmage. "Thank you," said Kathy and Diane both at the same time. "Would you two girls like me to spend the night in your room?" the headmistress offered kindly. "No!" cried Diane. "What she means," said Kathy quickly, "is that she has this terrible cold. You heard her sneeze, and we wouldn't want you to catch it." "Oh," said Miss Scrimmage, "how thoughtful of you. But Catherine might catch it too. Come along, Diane, to the infirmary with you. I shall look after you." With a glance of pure hatred at her grinning roommate, Diane followed Miss Scrimmage from the room. Kathy dragged Elmer out from under the bed. "All clear," she said cheerfully. Elmer mouthed the words, "I think I'm going to be sick." His voice was gone again. "I can understand how this sort of thing might upset you, this being your first time here," she said sympathetically. "I'll get a cold cloth for your head. You'll have to stick around for a couple of hours anyway until the heat's off. Meanwhile, please make yourself comfortable. There's a nice bed over there. Diane won't be needing it tonight." Elmer moaned and lay down gingerly, trying to sort out the events of the evening. "Where can he be?" exclaimed Bruno for the umpteenth time, pacing the floor like a worried father. "I don't care where he is," cried Boots. "Bruno, will you think of us for a minute? The fish is going to kill us tomorrow." "But what about Elmer? He's helpless, and we just left him there." Bruno was stricken with guilt. "We didn't leave him. We were marched away at gunpoint." Boots sighed miserably. "Oh, don't worry, Bruno. The way our luck has been running tonight, he'll probably turn up safe and sound." And that is the end of that chapter.